Pokemon is one of those series that is absolutely no stranger to weird controversy. Although like 98% of it is, admittedly, pardon my French, we're still in the first 30 seconds of the video, pretty freaking stupid. But one subject that's always been brought up frequently is violence. Because there is a certain threshold in which you have to ask yourself, is it just me or is this entire universe kind of fucked? And nowhere is that more evident than the Pokédex. Okay, hypothetical scenario, you're traveling through Hawaii and you see a sandcastle Pokemon. Your first thought might be, geez, Game Freak really ran out of ideas for this one. But excusing your fourth wall breaking comic antics, you're also likely to go, hey Siri, what the fuck is a sandcastle? And you know, it'll cover the basics. This Pokemon was playfully built by children. It likes to shovel on its head. Grudges of the dead have possessed a mound of sand and takes control of anyone who puts their hand into its mouth to fucking consume them. Yeah, this is real, by the way. And on that note, for this reason, I decided to read every Pokédex entry in the games to find out the answer to the question that literally nobody was thinking to themselves but me. What Pokemon commit war crimes in the Pokédex? Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go ahead and open up this video on a note I'm not particularly fond of doing, clarifying how I'm going to evaluate this. Because, with well over 1,000 Pokemon, including forms, and evaluating them over the manga, the anime, movies, the main series games, the spin-off games, the card game, the fucking condoms, I don't know. It's goddamn everywhere. So in this video, in particular, we're just going over the Pokédex entries. And you're going to miss a lot of Pokemon. I'm sure a lot of you were expecting Giratina because it's fucking Giratina. But surprisingly, despite everything, it's not necessarily a war criminal just off of its Pokédex entries. So on that note, here's a few rules. 1. I'm going to rule the Pokemon as if they were human. The laws regulating animals in war range from non-existent to barely noticeable. I mean, we're not going to go full bee movie in here and sue bees for existing and being bees. As far as I'm aware, as long as you aren't using an animal for the sole purpose of being a war crime, you're pretty much entirely fair game. But these aren't regular animals. If you go outside and you see a mouse in your backyard, you might have a varying range of reactions. Either, ah, cute, a mouse. Or maybe, oh, I hate mice, go away. Or you're not going to go, aw shit, I'm going to fucking die. So yeah. Number 2, the war crimes have to be depicted in the Pokédex. This one's very simple but has 2 purposes. Firstly, we're just not going to be counting game iterations, anime adaptations, or anything of that nature because really, there would be no non-war criminals. But do you just want to hear a monotone dude rap the entire Pokédex? No, that's not what you're here for. And for the second purpose, no math and no interpretation. If a Pokemon is said to have the power to destroy a mountain, that's cool, but does it actually do it? If it's said to just nuke mountains for the fuck of it, then yeah, that's not particularly good. If it's said that it has that power, who really cares? Basically everything in this universe can nuke a mountain. Join the club. Also, for the math part, let me bust out one example on why that's important. Lantern. Mathematically, Lantern's impossible. The power that it generates is so ungodly overpowered that it's not only equivalent to that of the observable universe, but dwarfs it by an unbelievable margin. I'm not exactly a professional in law. I'm not going to sit here and take fucking Lantern to court, but it's safe to say that if you're making a black hole roughly 10 to the power of 70 times the size of the observable universe, you're probably a war criminal. Anyways, with both of those out of the way, we have one more thing I wanted to quickly bust out before we get into the nitty-gritty. Poison. Poison is one of those things that is especially forbidden. There's not a scenario in which using poison is allowed or legal, and with an entire poison type, that makes this by far the most common war crime out of all the entries, with about 25 to 33% of all war crimes committed being related to poison. So instead of breaking video flow over and over again, I'm just going to real quick display every Pokemon on screen that is specifically outlawed for poison. Because as cool as I think this channel can be, I don't particularly think me saying poison is illegal over 50 times is something you or I exactly want to sit through. So yeah. And with that, we can finally get into the Pokédex. Have you seen the timestamps, by the way? This video is kind of long despite what the thumbnail would tell you. Is this clickbait? Debatably. But you know what, it's about time I got myself into the metagame. So our first victim is Venusaur, specifically its Gigantamax form, which says that it spouts huge amounts of pollen with the force of a volcanic eruption that can cause fainting. I'm going to go ahead and list this as biological warfare as well as indiscriminate attack because volcanoes don't exactly tend to have great precision in targets. Charmeleon and Charizard are both fairly simple. Don't cause forest fires. If you've seen my Bloons video, you may be surprised that I haven't mentioned the fire type in any real capacity, and that's because I specifically outlawed it in BTD 6 because you're fighting balloons. Those don't tend to have a really fun connection with fire, but for Pokemon, we're going with a standard restriction of incendiary weaponry. One of those restrictions being that you cannot cause forest fires unless it's being used to conceal a military objective. And not to have a rash assumption by any means, but I don't think every forest in the Pokemon world has been outfitted with a military base, so for that reason, they're both war criminals. Up next, excusing all the poison war crimes obviously, is Pidgeot. Pidgeot's wings have the power to whip up a windstorm with just a few flaps, which on its own wouldn't necessarily be a war crime. But it's the fact that these winds can bend tall trees that make me believe that this would fall under an example of weather warfare. Admittedly, this is a category that isn't all that well developed and elaborated upon in the real world due to limited testing. There have been tests and examples of this happening in real life, such as the Vietnam War. The United States military, to limited degrees of success, tried to manipulate the weather of that area to their advantage, such as increasing rainfall in a particular area by an estimated 30% to reduce the rate of infiltration. Whether or not this proved to be effective is hard to speculate, but either way, by 1977 it was outlawed to use any environmental modification techniques. Although there is still debate as to how this is regulated or how well it's enforced, such as whether or not the weather is permanent or has permanent changes, or if it's okay to do it on a smaller local scale. But for the sake of this video, it's going to be a flat-out ban because we're not dealing with 30% increases in rainfall or even a setup phase. You bust out Kyogre, all of a sudden rain is flooding the area. You bust out Groudon, droughts on an unseen scale instantly. That's not going to be acceptable. For a much simpler crime though, Raticate. This little guy needs to use its fangs regularly because they continuously grow. And if they're anything like their pre-evolution Rattata, it will literally die if its teeth gets too big. How does it solve this? Gnawing on rocks, logs, house walls, cinder walls, and concrete buildings. Of course, that's not particularly good, and is especially even more not good if Raticate decides to gnaw on a hospital or a military base or God knows what else. Ninetales is said to gain total control over their foe's mind if it shines its bright red eyes. And look, mind control is just a more advanced and effective way to say unethically taking hostages. And mind control comes up a lot more often than you would think, so for now, let's go ahead and set this basis that it's outlawed. Dugtrio is another case of weather manipulation, but with the added bonus of indiscriminate attack because instead of a storm or something, it's an earthquake. Past a certain magnitude is going to cause severe damage to not only the natural environment, but anything man-made. And earthquakes come up so often, I'm going to go ahead and pray that every building in the Pokemon universe has one form of earthquake protection or another. Because if not, I do not see a conceivable way in which civilization could ever develop. Mankey and Primeape, on the other hand, are just guilty of indiscriminate attack. Not a cool earthquake, no cool storms, just punch. Kind of boring, but yet kinda respectable. Kadabra presents us with an interesting moral question. Is it okay for a human to turn into a Pokemon? And I bring this up here not because Kadabra is necessarily a war criminal, it's kinda just weird, but I bring it up because there are a ton of Pokemon that are born or reborn from humans. And trust me when I say we are going to have an afterlife rant in this video. There are way too many contradictions, way too many random fucking Pokédex entries that throw a hammer into anything we could potentially know, and overall I am just confused. Machamp is strong enough to move mountains, with one arm. Now keep in mind that this thing has 4, and also it can throw 1,000 punches a second. It's kind of strong. Magnemite, Magneton, and Magnezone are, and I quote directly from my notes, complete assholes who keep making the power go out, magnets go burr, fuck power lines and can potentially blow you alive because fuck you. I don't know what I was going through when I wrote this, but it's not wrong. This is just about when I read so many Pokédex entries that my note-taking became neat and organized to completely dead and sporadic. And little did I know, I wasn't even 10% through the Pokédex. Shit. Well, anyways, the Ghastly line. Ghastly already has poison, which is already, as the Twitch youth would say, not very poggers, but if Haunter licks you, and Haunter will lick you, you'll start to shake constantly and uncontrollably until you fucking die. What's worse, Gengar not only indiscriminately attacks people, because why not, but its Mega Evolution will attack its very own trainer, and its Gigantamax form will literally beckon you to the afterlife by calling you with the mimicked voices of your loved ones. Remember how I said there was an afterlife rant? Keep this in mind. Gigantamax Kingler's bubbles are not very cool, and anybody hit by them will have their bodies melted away. Truly a classic comic antic worthy of the title, Chemical Warfare. Voltorb and Electrode are both interesting in the fact that they explode, but it actually isn't clarified if the explosion is like suicide, or if it's more so like an explosion radiating from the body. For one of my least favorite quotes I'm going to ever have to read in any video I'll ever make, suicide bombing is something I'll get more into at a future point in the video, but since it takes so little for it to be pressured into the point of exploding, it's going under indiscriminate attack. Galarian Marowak has the really funny comic antic of burning you, but don't you worry, that burn will never stop burning, and thus will never stop hurting you. If the concept of not being on fire for all eternity is already a bit, a bit casual, it also causes intense mental pain that will never fade. Thank you. This is torture. Unlawful, abhorrent torture that is a complete breach on the restriction of incendiary weaponry. Whoopsie. Lickitung is said to lick you if you're unclean, which already in itself should be a fucking war crime. But funnily enough, that licking is also said to cause paralysis. Now let me just go ahead and say that this might be literally the only Pokemon I can charge with sexual assault, because you are literally getting paralyzed and licked all over your body. I understand somebody out there just paused a video right now to use the bathroom, but I'm going to go ahead and hopefully assume for the better part of my sanity that 98% of you out there don't want that. Rhyhorn is just another basic case of indiscriminate attack, Magmar is forced fires, Gyarados is super indiscriminate attack, being said to destroy entire cities in a rage, Ditto is Ditto, and Gigantamax Eevee is possibly indiscriminate attack because it tries to play with anybody around it and crushes them because it's 59 goddamn feet tall. But it's also said that the fur can capture a body and captivate its mind. I don't know how literal that last part is, but there's definitely a case to be made for hostage taking. Kabutops is Desecration of the Dead, and although you can argue that most Pokédex entries are Desecration of the Dead in one way or another, I wanted to specifically list Kabutops since it's said to slice its prey apart, drain them of fluids, and discard the body. Not very fun. Mega Aerodactyl will attack anything that moves due to the burden of Mega Evolution. And fun fact for any of you who haven't noticed, Mega Evolution is just completely fucked. Game Freak basically decided at a boardroom meeting for Gen 7, well crap, we never did write any Pokédex entries for the Mega Evolutions. Let's just go ahead and guilt trip trainers into knowing that the thing they were forced to do for an entire generation and the rest of this generation causes them immense pain, and that even being alive in this form is a constant burden. Although I can sympathize with it, it's still indiscriminate attack. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres all have their very own flavor of weather warfare, with Moltres having the added benefit of consuming spirits. Dragonair also joins the legendary birds with its very own ability to change climate conditions and weather instantly. Obtuse, Rubber Goose, Green Moose, Guava Juice, Mewtwo, Generation 2. Starting off Generation 2 is one that I'm kind of confused about. Bayleaf. Bayleaf is stated in the Pokédex to have an aroma that makes people happy, peppy, energetic, and restores health. All in all, pretty cool, except for Gold, Stadium 2, Heart Gold, and Leaf Green in particular, which all say, yeah, this shit makes you want to fight. Go punch everything. Grrr. Biological Warfare. Lantern, despite mathematically being the most terrifying thing this planet has ever seen, also blinds people. Although it's never confirmed that this blinding is temporary or not, since it usually just finishes off its opponents after this, if it is permanent, that is potentially legal under blinding laser weapons. Although calling it a laser is a bit of a stretch, the sole principle is still there and, you know, I don't think I've said it yet, but Lantern can nuke the fucking universe. I think we can stretch the definition on what a laser is. Blossom performs a ritual to summon the sun. Although, just like the last entry, I'm unsure if this actually works or not, but I'll go ahead and give it a solid maybe under weather warfare. Umbreon surprisingly not only secretes a poisonous sweat, which, okay, sure I guess, but it also sprays it into your opponent's eyes, which again could potentially be labeled under a blinding weapon. Is this a laser? No. Is it chemical warfare? More than likely. Pineco. Just like Voltorb, this could potentially be labeled under suicide bombing. But this is where I have to go on that rant I mentioned earlier. Suicide bombing isn't exactly a war crime. It's the fact that they're usually incorporated under multiple war crimes. I mean, obviously nobody's gonna pick you up after you're a fucking smoldering pile of guts and cinder and be like, you're going to jail. But the point is, since they're usually indiscriminate attacks, you're usually pretending to be a civilian in one way or another, targeting citizens, and obviously if you're being ordered to be a suicide bomber, that's a crime against humanity. Now, am I saying that Giovanni has a bunch of Pinecos ready to release upon the world at any given moment? Well anyways, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how optimistic you are, all it takes for it to blow up is to drop on the ground. No warning, no provoking, nothing. Fuck you. War criminal. Up next is Magcargo, in which I'm going to be fucking blunt. The amount of people I see go online and go, Magcargo hotter than sun. It kill people. Bye bye planet, boom. You're fucking stupid. Yeah, it's hotter than the surface of the sun, but you know what it isn't? Hotter than the core of the sun, or even close to as big as it. So here's a good example. The sun is about 27 million degrees in its core, yeah? That's already immensely higher than Magcargo's measly 18,000, but do you know what we have created on Earth? Just in a lab? Something a little bit hotter than 27 million or even 18,000 degrees? Try 9.9 trillion. That's about 360,000 times hotter than the core of the sun, and we're still alive. But to be fair, mathematically Magcargo would kind of make anything around it melt, but nowhere near the fucking global scale that some people will make it out to be. If you want to watch some good videos on this topic, I would highly suggest this one. Anyways, Houndoom. Just like Alolan Marowak, burns you with a flame that contains toxins which, if you get burned, will cause a pain that will never go away. Chemical warfare, unethical incendiary weaponry, and torture. Fun. Kingdra is just a complete bastard. It creates whirlpools by yawning, which are said to swallow even entire ships, which gives it indiscriminate attack. But it also causes tornadoes as it wakes up, giving it that extra weather warfare spice I think we were all missing. Also, I guess some people might have already commented on the fact that weather warfare or even weather manipulation isn't a good term. Although it's not necessarily wrong, the correct term would be hostile use of environmental modification techniques. But if you expect me to say hostile use of environmental modification techniques every time it shows up, you're a fucking idiot. Weather warfare and weather manipulation prevent me from sounding like a redditor, are much shorter and sounds a lot cooler overall. Rest assured, my priorities are about as straight as my lesbian ex-girlfriend. Porygon 2 and Porygon Z are just kinda weird in the fact that they're just there, existing in cyberspace, doing their own thing. I mean, even outside of the context of this video, we've never seen it in the anime because the OG Porygon gave people seizures. So really, it could just be doing anything in there. There's potentially a case to be made for illegal cyber warfare, if we ever find out whatever the fuck it's doing in there, but since Rotom sort of took up that mantle, I don't think we'll ever get to see that happen. Stantler is a very fun and interesting creature in the fact that its antlers distort reality. What? I don't even know exactly what to charge this thing with, I'm just kind of confused. What? Why? What the fuck? Anyways, I guess Magby is indiscriminate burning, since every breath in and out dribbles smoldering hot embers out of its mouth and nostrils. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of fond of breathing, so I don't think it can really control that. Whenever Entei barks, a volcano erupts. Basically, if you finally catch that Entei you are chasing down all over Johto and suddenly you wake up one day to see the mailman approaching your house, know in the last fleeting moments of all humanity as we know it, you were the one who caused that destruction. Larvitar, Pupitar, Tyranitar, and Mega Tyranitar... I'm not even gonna fucking record that again, try saying that 5 times fast. Anyways, they all either eat or destroy mountains. And yes, I did say Larvitar. This thing has to eat a mountain to grow. A large mountain. And since the most common definition of a mountain right now is anything that rises at least 1,000 feet above its surrounding area, this is one of the many Pokemon that contribute to my classic, how the fuck do mountains still exist in Pokemon? Because seriously, mountains are the prey of attack in Pokédex entries on a regular basis. With there only being 1.1 million mountains in the real world, I don't see how any could exist in Pokemon land without Groudon going completely ballistic and raising them up on a 24/7 basis. And lastly, for Generation 2, Lugia. It's kind of depressing in the fact that if it flaps its wings it causes a 40-day storm. And although it has the power to calm those raging storms and actively appears to prevent them from hurting people, it still hides deep under the sea to prevent itself from hurting others. Honestly, I don't know if I can get myself to call it a war criminal. If it's this withdrawn and reluctant about its godly powers, then I'm going to go ahead and assume it's more of a net gain than a net loss. Anyways, with that, Generation 2 is done and we can move on to Generation 3. I mean, I think we're making good progress. I don't think a video's been going on that long. Fuck. Yeah, I knew this was going to be a long one. Alright, let's go ahead and jump straight into Generation 3. Leading off Generation 3 isn't actually a starter this time, but Poochyena with indiscriminate attack. Then, Zigzagoon. Sorry about that, I had a bit of a crisis there. Yeah, this is the sole Pokemon to get charged with feigning death, which although is technically under perfidy, and there are cases of that later, this is the only Pokemon known to feign death. Fucking Zigzagoon. But I guess on a less tangent-y note, if you're curious as to why feigning death is a war crime, basically in war... My favorite goon is a war criminal, and now I'm slightly depressed. Kirlia and Gardevoir can both see into the future, but while Kirlia just does some weird scenery mumbo-jumbo shenaniganizing, Gardevoir just casually summons a small black hole. Now here's the thing, summoning a small black hole is still summoning a black hole. Creating a black hole the size of even a penny would destroy the Earth. And you know, this is where most people would go, haha tee-hee Gardevoir stupid. But you know what? No. It's a fucking nihilist, because it sees into the future. It knows what the repercussion of summoning a black hole is. It wants everything and everyone to die. And I'm sure if you looked up Gardevoir on Google image search, you would too. Breloom and Shroomish are both under biological warfare due to their poisonous spores. But the reason I included them here and not necessarily the poison segment is the fact that they also cause great damage to the forest itself and makes plants wilt just by being near it. And Breloom is also not against punching you to death while you're choking. Is that a war crime? No. Is it a dick move? Yes. Shedinja is a classic don't steal souls verdict. Honestly, I have no clue what the hell you'd put don't steal souls under. Every category is a bit of a stretch, but I honestly think at the end of the day it's always a war crime. It also doesn't necessarily help that its way of stealing your soul is by peering into the crack on its back. And guess what every fucking trainer who sends it out is going to see? So for this I'll go for indiscriminate attack, although really there's a case to be made for many categories. The Whismur line are all indiscriminate attackers. Even the quiet Whismur cries at the sound of a jet plane and probably blowing your eardrums out and potentially blowing your head up in big enough numbers. But it ramps up to Loudred, which is loud enough to cause earthquakes, which goes under weather manipulation, or whatever the hell we're calling it at this point. And Exploud is Exploud. Sableye is also said to steal your soul, so just copy and paste the same thing I said about Shedinja. Mawile lures its enemies into a false sense of security with its docile face, however docile this fucking thing can be, and then proceeds to bite them with their two chompy boys and or girls. I don't discriminate. Anyways, it's perfidy in one way or another, so yeah, war crime. Aeron needs to stop eating train tracks and bridges, and especially needs to stop eating fucking mountains. Although, since it's only after iron ore, you probably need a lot more to be on the same skill as even one Larvitar. Public transportation fuckery aside though, Aggron is actually pretty cool. It's said to claim an entire mountain as its own territory, and mercilessly beats up anything that tries to hurt it. Honestly, we've reached some Pokédex paradox level bullshit, in which I have to ask, is the reason we have not seen the complete and utter extinction of mountains Aggron? But that implies wild Aggron are in every region, which they aren't, and that implies that there's 1.1 million Aggron just walking around. What happens if there's 2 Aggron per mountain? What about 3 Aggron? I don't fucking know, and at this point I'm just going to go ahead with my fan cannon that mountains just respawn and no-clip every Pokemon in its radius to prevent spawn camping or whatever. Manectric creates thunderclouds, which is a fun weather manipulation war crime, but also since that thunders will ignite forest fires, that's a double whammy. Swalot is, well, I don't like to kink shame. I'm into some pretty weird shit, I'm not even gonna fucking lie to you. But Vor in of itself should already probably be a war crime. But the fact that it's also more than likely desecration of the dead, and also the fact that it's a poison type, yeah, no. Carvanha in Sharpedo is just pretty basic indiscriminate attack, attacking any ship that dares enter its waters with absolutely no exceptions. Camerupt is indiscriminate incendiary bullshittery because who would have guessed it's a walking volcano, and Grumpig's, well, is yet another mind control Pokemon, because by doing this dumbass little dance with these black pearls on its body, it gains the power to control their opponent's minds. Again, that's just hostage taking with extra steps. Trapinch is a pretty basic booby trap. I mean, it's called a Trap-inch. It's kind of implied. But its main issue is the fact that it can just set up anywhere and everywhere. The thing with traps is that they have to be extremely regulated, because as it turns out, just leaving a bunch of traps behind after a war, or even during a war, for young kids to just skedaddle into casually isn't exactly an ideal time for the whole family. Hence you have to disclose information such as the location of all mines, making sure they're away from civilians and civilian areas, and having a way to disarm them safely. When Trapinch just sits the fuck down, opens its mouth real big, and just munches whatever comes its way, it just kind of ignores all that and is honestly just a bit of a dick. Its evolutions aren't too much better either, with Vibrava? Vibrator spewing acid capable of melting prey, and Flygon whipping up sandstorm with just its wings. So yeah. Also, fun fact, Trapinch has the same base attack stat as Flygon. This has absolutely no importance, but is one of those things I just think is incredibly fun. Cacturn is pretty straightforward. If you're walking through the desert at night and aren't currently getting consumed by a trapinch, it will stalk you and prey until you're exhausted and slaughter you. It stalks in groups too, so make sure you have a pretty strong Pokemon because, Wurmple ain't gonna cut it for this one. Solrock can blind its foes. Again, its permanence or extent of blinding isn't clarified, but still, have to bring it up, possibly a no-no. If Whiskash can tell a foe is approaching, it will trigger a massive earthquake. Yet another point for Team Indiscriminate Nature Manipulation Gang. Or INMAGA. We're not going with that one, actually. Lileep is a classic booby trap, but it does come with a brand new, fun twist that it looks like flowers. Or at least that's what the Pokédex entry tells us, because, these aren't flowers, Game Freak. This can be interpreted as many things. Flowers are not one of those things. Cradily 2 is very not good. It'll grab you with its tentacles and then proceed to melt you alive before eating you. Not only is this chemical warfare, but also extremely fucking backwards. But at the same time, I'm not a 4'11" dick monster, so what do I know? Bayonet is, well, firstly, it's a toy, so there's a case to be made for it being a booby trap inherently, since it's one of the things you cannot design a trap around. And although that claims a little bit of a stretch, one thing I can say for certain is stop fucking killing kids, Game Freak. Even Call of Duty is outclassing you in this one. And that's fucking Call of Duty. Dusclops is Kirby. If we get debunked Gardevoir for having a black hole, we get debunked Dusclops too. I'd say that sounds wrong, but I have a person who literally drew Gardevoir hentai in my server, and if it isn't evident by my tone of voice, I am just defeated. Glalie makes Big Snow go burr. Weather bad. I don't even know if Gorbis is a war criminal, I just know that it likes drinking body fluids, and at this point I'm powerless to stop it. How do you scorch a mountain? I don't know, but Salaman's found a way. It also just kills its trainer sometimes. It has the nickname the Blood-Soaked Crescent for a reason, which despite sounding like an edgy OC that a middle school Carl Weezer would make, it's just not particularly good. Take a wild fucking guess on what Kyogre and Groudon got in trouble for. It's a real doozy, I'll tell you that one. If you need help, let's make it a multiple choice question. I'll give you 10 seconds to review it, and hopefully you can either comment it below or do absolutely nothing. Wow, that sure was difficult. Make sure if you got it right to comment below that you befell this behemoth of second grade problem solving that I'm actually disguising as a way to boost the algorithm because this is an hour-long fucking video on Pokédex War Crimes. Anyways, I guess for once a Pokédex entry that actually has interpretation, Jirachi. Now I know that using my brain power for more than anything beyond basic survival functions is not good. But Jirachi grants any wish for 1 week every 1,000 years. Primarily the ones that you write on the notes on its head. Or write on a note on its head? I honestly don't know if post-it notes were the intended route, but if the Pokemon Evil teams have taught me anything, it's that their leaders have a solid 60% chance of either being completely incompetent dumbasses that surprise me in their capability of even getting a Pokemon past level 7, or the remaining 40% chance of being a completely incompetent dumbass that has the end goal of, yeah, let's just go ahead and kill everyone, LMAO. Is this a common mindset? I don't know. But maybe we don't need some edgy middle school nihilist getting lucky with timing and wishing for the world to end because the E-Kitten blocked him on Discord after giving her a year of Discord Nitro with his allowance. And with that, Generation 3 is complete, and we get to move on to, who would have guessed, Generation 4. Skipping all the way to Rampardos, we've got yet another classic instance of fuck skyscrapers in particular. Although it's only been documented once, so maybe this is just a rare example rather than a norm. Either way, that one in particular is just a dick. After that is Drifloon and Drifblim, which are both in the iconic stop fucking killing children category. Although Drifblim doesn't discriminate. Does that make it better or worse? I honestly don't know. I feel like that's ultimately up for debate. But at the end of the day, if we could have a single generation without having at least one Pokemon have the defining characteristic of being an advocate for 8-year late-term abortion, I would be much obliged. Bronzong makes it rain. Although this does come with a caveat that it was referred as a bringer of plentiful harvests, meaning it wasn't going full Kyogre on everyone. On a similar-ish note, Hippowdon, but this time for Twisters and Sandstorms. Ironically, despite having the ability Sandstream for as long as it did, it only got the Sandstorm added in by Pokemon Shield. Which is strange because you'd figure it'd be vice versa, but whatever. After that we got Abomasnow, which is actually our third fucking hostile use of environmental modification techniques in a row. Generation 4 so far has about as much diversity as a gated Minecraft YouTuber Twitter group. Licky Licky is a bioweapon just like its pre-evolution. Do I really need to go in depth on this one? Dusk Noir? Dusky is more afterlife shenanigans. But oddly it seems to be more of a transporter rather than strictly a malicious being. I mean hell, it gets radio waves from its antenna to take people to the world of the spirits, and it's not known if it actually has a will of its own. I'm not well versed enough to really know if this makes it a war criminal, but again, afterlife rant. It's coming soon, I swear. Frostlass is a pretty cut and dry case of desecration of the dead. If it finds a human it likes, God forbid, it freezes them to death and turns them into a decoration. We really didn't need Slanesh invading the Pokemon world, but whatever, the more the merrier. And surprisingly, that's actually it. Giratina and Darkrai, dare say, are pretty sus. And Dialga and Palkia need to be alive in order for the universe to not completely crumble in on itself, but that's not necessarily a war crime. Really in particular, fuck Mesprit for giving me emotions. I want to be a robotic shell of a person. But yeah, most of the other war crimes in this generation are poison, such as Skorupi, Drapion, and Roserade, so thus far this is actually the shortest generation, but still, progress. On to Generation 5, Gigalith is in Team Fuck the Mountains. I don't think we need to really elaborate on this one anymore. Excadrill is usually pretty cool. He likes to help in tunnel construction and generally he's just badass. But the problem is that it also destroys subway tunnels, and we really don't need any more civilian casualties. Seismitoad is said to paralyze enemies with liquid that they shoot from their head bumps, which I'm gonna go ahead and say is probably some sort of chemical or biological warfare. But it's also said to cause earthquake-like tremors, which is, as the Twitch youth would like to say, kinda sus. But I also can't exactly fault it since it's only earthquake-like. Scrafty has acidic liquid that it can shoot from its mouth. That's cool, I guess. Chemical warfare. Cofagrigus has been very cautious about potential claims of being a desecrator of the dead, so in his free time he decided that grave robbers that he consumes aren't just dead, or sent to the afterlife, nor did he decide to eat their souls. He turns them into mummies. I think this is literally the only case of reverse desecration of the dead, but isn't morally ethical. I don't know. The law is stupid. I have nothing to comment on. Do you want to see a video of my dog getting a treat? Wow, that sure is a video of my dog getting a treat. Anyways, Gothorita. At night they use their cosmic power of the stars to control sleeping children and befriend them. Huh. You know, I have to say it, I'm actually on team kill the kids for this one. Because at least when you're dead you don't have to worry about dying anymore. Instead, I have to worry about my potential children having an edgy goth teenager mind control them into a field and trying to befriend their practically lifeless body. I believe there's a Japan word for this, but I don't speak anime, so I don't know what it is. Vanillux makes blizzards, but not the kind you order at Dairy Queen and see people whose souls have evidently left their bodies flip upside down because they're legally mandated to or something. Just blizzards. Also Oreo Blizzard Gang for life. Imagine getting a fucking Heath Bar Blizzard. What the hell is wrong with you? Carablast can spit out acidic liquid because he's just a little dude with angry eyes and angry teeth. Still acid though. Amoongus, despite being a hit game amongst the youth that never fails to make me feel like a boomer when I hear my 5-year-old niece describe something as sus, is actually the most insidious booby trap we've discussed thus far. This entire video has just been this comic right here. As humans, we aren't naturally incentivized to delve our head into a Venus flytrap, or think a bear trap is something we should shove our hands into. Unless you're into some weird niche gay community, but I don't judge. Pokeballs, though. Shit, dude, that's like 200 fun bucks. I'd love to get my hands on that. And then bam. Amogus. Bad. Frillish and Jellicent just kind of drown people because LMAO. Jellicent in particular sinks entire ships just to drown the crew. That's always a fun time for the whole family. But at least they got a literal fucking castle of ships. How do you make a castle of ships? I don't know, but they sure as hell found a way. BHM rewriting memories and controlling minds isn't exactly ideal, but the fact that they made sure to include "you too may have already had your memories rewritten" at the end of its Pokédex entry for Ultra Sun wasn't required either. But either way, this is yet another "let's not mind control hostages, please." But guess what, boys, it's Litlick time, and this is where I can finally devolve. I've been hinting at it for a long time, but it's time for what fucking afterlife is there in Pokemon? Because at this point we've had Pokédex entries hinting at multiple afterlives, but it's always described as the afterlife. And some of you at home might be thinking, well, obviously this is reflective of the real world, and this is Game Freak intentionally including multiple conflicting afterlives as a neat little speculatory thing. And firstly, who in their right fucking mind would read every Pokédex entry willingly? And secondly, this is coming from the company that thinks making an anglerfish that is so bright that it can nuke the universe multiple times over by existing is subtle, so I don't want to hear that shit. Okay, so we have the afterlife. And this is the easiest to identify because it's always labeled as the afterlife. Problem though, Pokemon have the power to absorb, eat, or otherwise destroy souls and spirits. And in some cases they either strengthen the Pokemon, forces that soul to walk the world forever, and/or that soul or souls become a Pokemon. So we have a centralized afterlife where most people go to, and possibly Pokemon, but there's also the potential to be incinerated and be denied access to that afterlife and be tormented forever. Being a ghost already isn't too ideal, but in some cases like Yamask's, they retain the memories of their former lives and begin to cry. In which I have to ask, is Yamask the exception or a secret norm we don't know about? Of course there's theories about the distortion world, but as of current we have at least 4 confirmed afterlives. The afterlife, which is never elaborated upon but has guides and entrances, becoming a spirit to walk the land, reincarnating or assimilating into a Pokemon, and just non-existence. Blackness forever, presumably. And I fucking refuse to accept the fact that if there is a scientifically proven and accepted afterlife, we aren't just exterminating some Pokemon en masse. Imagine if, in real life right now, we found out that the afterlife exists, everybody is happy, woohoo, we did it. But we found out that jellyfish would actually deny you access to that irrefutable proven afterlife. Everybody would be pissed. Jellyfish would not only be hunted to extinction, but forever be reveled as the worst creature on the planet. And it's not even the fact that it's guilt for the future, but if you had a close family member die to a jellyfish, you're probably even more enraged. I refuse to believe that any of these fucking Pokemon are not only allowed, but are still alive. I would not put it past people to hunt Chandelure to extinction and revel in their fucking eternal torment. But at this point you don't need a what, you don't need a why, you don't even need a when. All you need is the motivation for people to justifiably commit mass genocide on an unseen scale, and it's going to happen. Chandelure should not exist. Most ghost-type Pokemon should not exist. It is a scientific impossibility that these things are allowed to be alive, and the fact that they're not currently fucking dead. Cryogonal's a snowflake. It takes hostages. Whoa. Galarian Stunfisk is a booby trap. Just like Amoonguss, it has a Pokeball as bait. But unlike Amoonguss, it's just going for more of a standard bear trap approach. So no poison mumbo jumbo bullshit. If the seal on Galar's chest is removed, it makes its internal energy spiral out of control and turns the entire immediate area into a pile of rubble indiscriminately. I mean, it's there in the Pokédex entry. I don't really need to elaborate on this one. Bouffalant and Hydreigon are both the same thing, except Bouffalant just targets trains because fuck public transportation. Me and my homies hate public transportation. Tornadus is, well, weather warfare. causing severe storms powerful enough to blow away houses. Who would have guessed that one with a name like Tornadus? Thunderous is a bit more unique though, being said to throw lightning bolts indiscriminately and frequently causing forest fires, and apparently it is therefore disliked. I really like this one because this is one of the few Pokemon that's just flat out said to just be disliked. Apparently denying you access to the afterlife, torturing your soul for all eternity, and otherwise causing immense pain on an apocalyptic scale is just not good enough. This one is just a particularly dense dickhead and therefore we hate it. What the actual fuck is the Pokemon universe? And also, on a similar note, Reshiram and Zekrom both have the same charge. They're both said to be able to scorch the entire world, Zekrom with lightning and Reshiram with fire, of course. Gotta make sure we sell 2 copies of every game. After that is Generation 6. We have Fletchinder, which is said to set tall grass on fire to bewilder their prey. Do you know what usually happens after you set fire to tall grass? Yeah. Hoenn is by far the most interesting case of a booby trap we have thus far. First, it's inhabited by a dead spirit, because of course it is, but also if any person tries to grab its hilt, it wraps its blue cloth around their arm and drains their life force completely. Although I'm not going to make the bombastic claim that a sword is a children's toy or food, the typical response to grabbing a sword isn't fucking dying, so I'll go ahead and consider it an unethical breach of booby trap regulations. Aegislash is actually a bit more malicious, being able to tell who has qualities fit of becoming a king and manipulating them to control people and Pokemon. And after that person becomes a king, don't you worry, just like Hoenn, it'll still drain your life force. One incident being so devastating that the entire kingdom fell shortly after the king's death. Although it is only said to manipulate, with the ghost type's history of being hostage-taking bastards and the fact that Aegislash can't exactly talk and gaslight you or whatever, I'll put this under hostage-taking and causing extreme terror amongst citizens. Malamar's the same thing, as it's said to have the most compelling hypnotic powers of any Pokemon and forcing others to do whatever it wants. No. Dragalge is already a no-no on the fact that it's poisonous, but the fact that it spits it indiscriminately at anything that enters its territory, especially ships, and the fact that its poison is strong enough to melt through steel, it's kind of not a good thing. We got poison, we got chemical warfare, we got indiscriminate attacks, but sadly, unlike Jellicent, it doesn't even make a cool castle out of ships. It just does it because Wamau. Tyrant is a chompy boy who runs wild, chews up automobiles because again, fuck transportation, has a violent disposition, and tears apart anything that can get in between its hefty jaws. Bad. Does the Aurora Borealis count as a storm? What the hell is an Aurora anyways? This is too much boring science stuff for me, Captain. It looks pretty, so fuck it, this thing gets to stay. I don't know. Sliggoo excretes a sticky liquid that can dissolve anything, which is already a solid 0 out of 10 for a slimy guy, but the fact that its eyes devolved and is now unable to see is not a particularly good combo. Phantump is a dead kid. If it isn't evident by this point in the video, I have no clue how the fuck I'm supposed to rate this thing on a war crime scale. But Trevenant goes full Treebeard and kills anybody that wanders into its forest wanting to harm it. Now, its definition of harming the forest is a bit vague. Some definitions mean ravaging the forest and some just mean cutting down trees. I mean, deforestation is cringe. I do much like the concept of breathing and seeing the color green outside of my Mountain Dew addiction. But if a dude's just making a house, isn't that a bit far? I don't know. If we can have a trainer figure out the extent of bastardry you have to go through in order to get Vord, I'd be much obliged. Pumpkaboo is another dead kid. Tim Allen's home improvement grunt.mp3. Gourgeist, on the other hand, is just a grand old time. Small Gourgeist pretend to be children to kill adults, which despite sounding like a solid development for a season of To Catch a Predator, is still illegal. Large-sized do the same thing but vice versa, putting on the guise of adults to kill children, and supersized aren't picky and will just forcefully drag anyone off to the afterlife. I was going to say maybe average-sized were safe too, but even they knock on doors just to kill anyone who answers the door. As it turns out, size does matter, but not in the sexy way, just the war crimey way. But I mean, if that's what you're into, I'm not gonna stop you. Noivern is just a bastard. It attacks everything it sees with ultrasonic waves that can crush boulders and ruthlessly torments their enemies while they are helpless in the dark. Yveltal is going in the "don't fucking cause the apocalypse please" category. If it dies, it absorbs the life energy of every living thing and turns into a cocoon. There's a few reasons 2 billion lions can't ever win against every Pokemon, and this is one of those reasons. Moving on to Generation 7, Crabominable. It punches indiscriminately, and instead of doing that helpful thing called thinking, it starts blasting. And if their punches are strong enough to smash walls of ice to bits, you're not getting out of that one. Oricorio, specifically its Sensu style, is the only Pokemon that's a goddamn necromancer. They summon the dead while dancing, which is blatant desecration of the dead and... Wait, you know what this means? There's another fucking afterlife. Literally a 5th one dedicated just to Oricorio. Game Freak, you can't just develop an entire fucking afterlife and dedicate it to a single Pokédex entry for a dumbass bird. What the fuck? Anyways, Sandygast is, as I said in the intro, it mind controls anyone who puts a hand in its mouth, and then proceeds to consume them and anyone else who dares make the same mistake until it becomes a palisand. And buried inside those castles are literal masses of bones from those who were unfortunate enough to stick their hand into a fucking sand castle. Also, add in sandstorms in there because as if we weren't already going to jail for literally eating dozens of people by existing, we might as well throw in weather manipulation as a third war crime. Turtonator's shell is chemically unstable, and explodes very violently and probably falls under an illegal form of bomb. But also highly volatile poisonous gases exhales from its nostrils, so chemical warfare on top of already being poisonous. Fantastic. Drampa, and I quote, "This Pokemon is friendly to people and loves children most of all. It comes from deep in the mountains to play with children it likes in town. If a child it has made friends with is bullied, Drampa will find the bully's house and burn it to the ground." Okay, honestly, I do not care. Your Honor, Drampa is innocent. This thing is excused from war crimes off of the simple contradiction that it is based as all hell. Tapu Koko causes thunderstorms. There's not a whole lot to say here. Weather warfare. Fucking Mega Bloks over here infests people and causes them to become violent, which is obviously an illegal case of biological warfare, impossibly psychological warfare. Celesteela just burns down forests casually. And although that on its own is already a war crime, the fact that it's said to do so with gases in specific give it that special chemical warfare edge. Kartana has one documented case of just 9/11ing a giant steel tower with one stroke of its blade. Although, since this is one documented case and it wasn't confirmed what type of steel tower it was, I can't exactly give it a proper verdict. But if this thing does it on a regular basis, it's 100% a war criminal. Guzzlord, being the wholesome 100 chunker redditor that it's always strived to be, is said to gobble mountains and swallow buildings, constantly eating and always devouring something with absolutely no regards to what it's eating. Although it never shits, which, good, I guess? Thanks, Game Freak. Lastly, for Gen 7 Necrozma. Already its base form has an extraordinarily vicious disposition and constantly fires off laser beams indiscriminately. But also its Dawn Wings form is hilarious in the fact that it reads, "Yeah, this thing is vicious, seeing enemies everywhere it looks. Yeah, that's probably a good cause for indiscriminate attack." But then it just casually nudges in the sentence, "It will burn the world with lasers." What the fuck? Don't you think it's a tad bit helpful to put more importance on this than one sentence at the end of one specific Pokédex entry? This is a threat. It's not just saying it can burn the world with lasers, it will. Can we, not do that, please? Anyways, after this is Generation 8, which sadly for us is one of the generations with the least war crimes, so not a fantastical note to end this off on. Although, to be fair, this video's length is already immense, so let's just go ahead and finish this. Gigantamax Corviknight's wings can whip up winds so powerful that no hurricane could compare, and it blows everything away. I honestly don't know if this is qualified as weather manipulation technically, but either way, whipping up gusts of winds to completely demolish an area indiscriminately isn't particularly good. Gigantamax Orbeetle, on the other hand, has watched so much Rick and Morty that its brain expanded to the point that it can control the minds of every living being in its vicinity. Granted, it doesn't have any documented cases of doing so, only saying it has the potential to, but really that just might entail that any trainer that has seen it and has any hint of scientific contribution to the Pokédex are just rotting away in some corner against their will. Flapple is just pretty basic chemical warfare. Since it ate a sour apple, it can store an acid in its cheeks capable of causing chemical burns. Not a whole lot of elaboration needed on this one. Gigantamax Toxtricity, on top of it and its pre-evolution obviously poisoning stuff, loses all of its control after Gigantamaxing due to its own poison penetrating and injuring its brain, which causes it to rampage across the land and contaminating the earth itself with toxic sweat. Lots of no-nos on this one. Sinnoh is actually the best example of an illegal booby trap in the entire series. For this in particular, you can't design a trap after food or drink, children's toys, or portable objects designed for feeding and taking care of children, as well as kitchen utensils. Sinnoh falls under all of these, and since it actively uses this to absorb the life force of anything that drinks it, this is a completely unethical and entirely illegal booby trap through and through. Morgrem is known to get down on all fours as if to appeal for forgiveness, and then tries to lure their opponents so that it can stab them with its spear-like hair. This is an obvious example of perfidy, specifically false surrender. Good job, buddy. You did awful, you angsty preteen fuck. Frostmoth causes blizzards to any of those who desecrate its homes over fields and mountains. Although Team Fuck the Mountains need to be stopped at any cost, maybe not the fields, and probably not do blizzards either. After this, we skip all the way to Eternatus, and we have a pretty cut and dry case of indiscriminate attack. Since it pours infinite amounts of energy from its core, warps surrounding space-time, and absorbs all of the energy in the region of Galar. And lastly, to wrap this video up, like I said, this is an incredibly short generation. Spectrier is said to dash through the night and absorb the life force of sleeping creatures, and its kicks are said to separate your soul from your body. So again, we're going to end this list not on a bang, but rather whimper, because this is like the 17th time in which I have to ask Game Freak what the actual shit is going on with your afterlives. Stop killing souls, please. So, yeah. This was a video that I made, and you watched, presumably. Hopefully by this point you at least had a humorous exhale out of your nose. If not, I'm surprised. Not because I think I'm particularly funny, but mostly because I don't know what narrative you have to spin or what levels of spite you have to be running on in order to get through almost an hour of Pokédex War Crimes. Now I'd like to do the classic thank you to my patrons for supporting me thing, because they gave me financial support in a time where I spent 3 weeks making this fucking video. Also, to say it outright, if you want your name recognized on this completely prestigious list full of only, people who've made good financial decisions, make sure to check out my Patreon. But also, I'd like to thank the creators on screen. It's no secret that I don't exactly have hundreds of gigabytes of footage of Pokemon at my disposal, so feel free to check out these channels. If I dare say so myself, I'd like to think that most of them are pretty cool. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Especially because this is by far the longest video I've ever made by a pretty large margin, and I honestly have no clue if people are going to enjoy it. But with that being said, if you've made it here, hopefully I did something right. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, stay frosty, my friends.